a test plan for our next trial. In this case, I want to use a single function that can take in either integers or floats, and that can have an optional exit code. To begin, create a copy of the number checker we used in the last video, and change the function name so that it says numcheck instead of intcheck. We also need to update our docstring. I've added 2 extra parameters, one for the number type, and one for an exit code, which is by default set to none. Next, we can set up custom error messages for an integer or a float, and we can also specify whether we're wanting to make our response an int or a float. Then in our try code, instead of going for an integer, we can change it either to an integer or a float. Our exit code isn't going to always be XXX. We can check for it by saying if the response is the exit code. Then in the main routine, we can go ahead and call the function. For the float, we don't need an exit code. And for our integer, we can specify an exit code of enter so that it will match our test plan. We do need a print statement so that we can confirm that our code is working correctly. And for our integer, if the user chooses enter, our test plan says to say they've chosen infinite mode. Otherwise, we're just going to output what number they chose. And I can go through the first part of my test plan and it works as expected. When I go through the first part of my test plan, it works as expected. And it's working successfully for the first part of my integer test plan. I can then check across the boundaries for my float. I can check across my boundary for my integer. And the final thing that I need to do is I need to check what happens when I push enter for an integer, and it does work successfully. And here's what my testing screenshot looks like. Another trial for a number checker could involve checking for an integer between 2 numbers. My test plan in this case is checking for integers, so I'm going to go back to my integer checker. I can add in a parameter for my low number and my high number, update my docstring, and also update my error message. This time around, because there's no exit code, I can dive straight into my try code and ask the question. I've got a really convenient notation for checking that the response is between a low and a high number. And in this case, I'll accept it if it is equal to the low number or equal to the high number. We can then go into our main routine and we can loop for testing purposes, calling our function where the low number is 1 and the high number is 10, because that's what we said we'd use for testing purposes in our test plan. A reminder that if you do have PEP8 errors, you can mouse over, and often reformatting the file is going to remove those unwanted spaces and resolve that error for you. As always, we want to systematically follow our test plan exactly, and we can confirm that our error message is working correctly, and we can show that it worked for all of our test cases. As this video is getting a little bit long, we're going to develop our final no lies number checker in the next video.